everyone. My name is Melanie Dizon. I'm the Director of Education and Research at the Davis Phinney Foundation, and I am here today with Lianna Marie. How you doing?
Hi, I'm good.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Lianna was a care partner. She's going to tell her story, and we're going to be talking today about her story as a care partner, her journey with her mom, writing a couple of books, how you can get information on those books and where to pick them up, and just a whole bunch of interesting information that we hope you can use and take on to live better as a Parkinson's care partner. Lianna, can you get us started and tell us a little bit about your story as a Parkinson's care partner?
Sure. Thanks, Melanie. So we have a long story. My mom and I, she lived with Parkinson's for 30 years. And when she was first diagnosed, it was in the early 90s. And back then, there weren't a lot of people that knew as much about Parkinson's as we know about today. Especially her doctor didn't know that much about Parkinson's. Of course he did, but because she was in her 40s, he said, "Oh, you're too young to have Parkinson's." So it actually took her 3 years of complaining about this little tremor in her pinky before her doctor finally referred her to a neurologist, and then she got diagnosed. So that time, again, it was sort of like I was in my teens still, so I didn't know a lot about my mom in general, and let alone Parkinson's. But I do remember her saying to me not too long after that diagnosis, she said, "Don't worry, Lianna, I have the good kind of Parkinson's." And I had no idea what that meant, but later I found out what she meant was the doctor had said you can expect a longer progression, you live longer with the disease because her main complaint was a tremor. It wasn't slowness of movement or stiffness or anything else like that. So I do remember that going, okay, well, that's one good thing. Other than that, we didn't know a heck of a lot. So, and that was, I would say the first, probably about 10 years she was able to continue working. She worked at a desk job. And there wasn't major disruptions that I can recall, but I do remember we learned a lot of things by trial and error. And one day, about 10 to 15 years in, we were chatting at our kitchen table and just kind of reminiscing about all the things that she had learned on her own. Things like, when her doctor initially told her to go to a support group, she did. She obeyed. She went to the support group and walked into this room full of people in wheelchairs. Now, she was just diagnosed. She's in her late 40s, and she's traumatized by seeing this because she says to me, like, if that's how I'm going to be, don't tell me. So one lesson we learned there was always call ahead to the support group, the moderator, to make sure that the people that you're going to be, hanging out with are in the similar kind of stage that you're in. We also talked about things like she had learned about dystonia. I didn't even know what that word meant. But her early on in her progression of disease, she had this challenge with her right foot kept turning in, and it was really painful, and she had a challenge walking on it. So we went to physiotherapy, and she got a kind of a removable cast that she could wear, which would help her walk, which was a great little find. The biggest find that we found accidentally was the power of music. And this is something that really helped her all the way through Parkinson's. And that was just a total random thing that we learned, which I happened to be a runner and listened to music while I was running. And one day my mom was experiencing freezing. And this is something that can, as you know, can happen to some people with Parkinson's, and just like frozen in her tracks. I tried putting on these earphones on her ears, and magically, it seemed like magic, she just started walking again slowly and get her going. And this was like a fast beat music. That was something that changed everything, because then once I saw that it worked so well, I gave her some tunes that she liked, and everywhere she went, she had this MP3 player hanging around her neck, which then became an iPhone and then a smartphone, whatever, over the years. But essentially, we just made sure she had music all the time. So anyway, all of these things that we learned by kind of trial and error, we realized, Mom, you learned a lot of stuff on your own. And that was sort of the impetus of us writing a book together the first time. Fast forward, and she remarried, and that was around year 10 of her diagnosis. And Dave, who then became, over the next several years, became her caregiver. So I became a little bit more in the background at that time. Unfortunately, Dave, God bless him, he really had great intentions of being the best caregiver, but he had some challenges doing that and setting boundaries and learning how to care for himself while he was caring for mom. So we decided we would seek some outside help, which we did in forms of like just getting some housekeeping things to help mom and Dave. That's how it started. And then we just tried to outside caregivers, me helping more often and that kind of thing. And over time, sadly, mom developed dementia probably around year, I think it was 22 of her having Parkinson's. And by that time, her and Dave had basically, they were separating because their lives together were just so volatile. It was just not good. And at that time, we, as a family, decided that we had very few options in terms of her care. She needed 24-hour care. So we landed, mom and us decided we would place her in a nursing home. And my mom lived in Canada, so that's where we ended up. And for her last 8 years of her life, she spent those in nursing homes, 4 different ones. And as tragic to many people, that may sound tragic, but I will say she did extremely well considering. And one of the things we take pride in for her doing as well as she did was because we built this team around her, which I always encourage care partners to think about is, who are the other people that can help on the way. And it's not just me. It wasn't just, my mom's spouse. It was a lot of others who helped her get the best quality of life that she could. We hired outside caregivers, for example, but we also had, she had a great relationships with her movement disorder specialist and neurologist, doctors, physiotherapists, nutritionists. We had a lot of people over the years. We built up a team that gave her the best chance, anyway, I believe, to have the best quality of life. And, she passed peacefully last year. She developed pneumonia and passed away after a couple of days of that. But for the most part, I would say we felt, we did the best that we could, like most people do, especially when dementia sets in. But she, who knows where she would have been had that not set in, because she had done so well. And so, but that's pretty much in a nutshell. That's a big nutshell. Big nutshell.
Yeah, I don't want to go too far into the weeds, but I do know that people watching are going to want to know, that first step when you said, oh, we hired in-home help, and it is different. That was in Canada. We're in the US, although some things still apply. But what did you do? Like, what was your first step? Who did you call to say, right, I need this kind of care in my house? Because I know there are a lot of people who are living alone and may be able to use
sure. So the biggest thing in hindsight, when we did it, and I was just a little bit frantic because I wasn't sure, but I had heard my mom's sister, a little bit older than me, so she got involved. My aunt got involved, and she said there was a local organization that would set us up with certain number of hours per week that we could get free. And so it was the community care organization that was in that province. And had I not learned about that, I would have been calling probably, again, the Parkinson's, and start with there, because I feel like there's a lot of nonprofits that can direct you if you don't know where to go. So you start with, okay, so my mom needs, basically we were trying to get as much as we could for free, which I think is really, you should. So I think we got designated 8 hours, which is like nothing, right? But 2 hours, maybe it was 10, 2 hours a day for 5 days a week meant that someone came in to just take the load off of Dave. Initially, we did this just as housekeeping, like dishes, and, basically we were asking the questions, what can you do for us to start off so that Dave could be a better spouse and caregiver for the needs of mom? Because she wasn't needing 24-hour care yet, but she certainly needed more because she was mobile. I would say mobile 50% of the day. She had a wheelchair, she had a walker, she had a cane, and depending on what state she was in that day. But she was getting, like I said, there were signs that, we were aware that dementia might set in, but, who knows, right? So that's how we started, was just an organization that was a local, just general care organization run by the government there, provincial government. Now, again, because I live in the US, and so I'm learning about each individual state is different in terms of what you can get for free. Then you also can tap into, like I said, if you go to your Parkinson's Association, they can often direct you to care organizations. For individuals who aren't part of a broader organization, honestly, I think we got a little lucky, but I started Googling caregivers and what have you. And then when we had actually found one, we had vetted her. She ended up being someone who worked at a nursing home and a long-term care facility. So we knew that she had the background of, working with folks that had needs like my mom. And so we just gave her a try, and we hired her, a couple hours a week. And so that worked out really well. And then she knew somebody, and then she knew somebody, and a lot of it was word of mouth, finding different people. And that's where, in hindsight, had I been, really active in a support group, maybe I would have found, through them, you could talk to other people that are in a caregiving support group, for example. If you can tap into getting involved in one of those, you might find some help locally that way. That would be one idea, I would say, to look for help as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And also we have ambassadors for the Davis Phinney Foundation that are all over the country, and in, I don't know how many states now, but a lot. And so, people can always look on our site if you want to find something locally. Because as you said, and it's surprising to me how many people don't know that their regional, at least, or local area has a Parkinson Foundation.
Yeah.
And so those great places to start.
And so, especially if you live in a small town, for example, you may feel like, but that's the beauty of the internet. You can Google your local foundation, and if you start with Davis Phinney, for example, and then they can find your state, and then you find the ambassador who can help you out.
Yeah. So moving a little bit, you said about all the different places that she was in, and there are so many different types of places, right? There are group homes, there's skilled nursing facilities, there's independent living, assisted living, retirement, all of those kinds of things. So can you just talk a little bit about your progression with your mom?
For sure. And long-term care is still long-term care, whether you're in Canada, the US, or Australia, England, wherever. Long-term care is essentially somebody who needs care over a long period of time, and most likely they're going to end up staying over time. And we know that Parkinson's does progress. The question is at what speed. So when my mom first moved, we had looked into assisted living, but honestly, it wasn't going to work out. We were able to keep her at home before for long enough that by the time her needs were too high for assisted living. So she went into, it was a continuing care type of place, where it was a retirement home attached to long-term care, attached to, you know what I mean? Sort of, there was, and then at the far end, which is where my mom did end up, was a dementia section of the long-term care facility. We didn't know that she would necessarily end up needing to be in there, but yeah. So, and the reason she ended up in 4 was because initially, we were sort of like a lot of people. I think it's like, you don't really plan this. It kind of happens like all of a sudden. Even though over time my mom was progressing, we didn't realize Dave wasn't going to be able to take care of her, and that I wouldn't be able to take her into my home, or my siblings weren't going to be able to do that. And so all of a sudden we're frantic, going, well, she needs to go somewhere. And there was a place that opened up, but it was just like a respite place for, it was meant for a month or 2. And it was really not a good place in terms of, felt like an institution, like the old school. There's still places like that are out there, unfortunately. But thankfully, we were able to get into one. We got her on a list, which in Canada, waiting lists are a thing. They're not much here. but we got her on a list and she was able to get into another one. And you know, this is a whole other story, is learning about things that what you need to know about long-term care, and what are some questions you need to ask before you help your loved one move into one, and what are some things to look out for, and all those things which we learned over time. You know, thankfully we eventually got it right on their fourth try.
And are those questions and, you know, assessments, are those in your books somewhere that people can check out? Or?
Yeah, in the caregiving book that I wrote, Everything You Need to Know About Caregiving Parkinson's Disease, do touch on it a little bit, but because it's such a large topic, I'm writing about that in a separate one, because it's just, and it, like, I don't want to be depressing to people and say, this is what's going to happen to you and your loved one is going to end up here. But it's just to make people aware of there are options, and there are getting to be better options for people if you know where to look. And again, I think all Parkinson's associations should have this on their radar and be able to help people who are seeking, especially people who are in later stage Parkinson's that are looking for help like this, that they know where to direct people within their state, because it is like so different wherever you go. In Washington State, where I live, we have adult family homes, which are sometimes appropriate. You call it, I think, you know, there's just for them, but
Yeah.
you say group homes. Sometimes those are appropriate earlier on, and they're great because fewer people in those, and you get a more one-on-one quality, you know, the care can be higher. But many of those, if your loved one has needs that are too high, and especially dementia, they're not going to be able to care for your loved one. So the dementia aspect is a specific thing. My mom actually had very minimal dementia when she first went in. She was just starting, but her physical needs were quite high. And so that's a tricky situation.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, it is. It's such a big topic. We are constantly looking at it, and we're just constantly getting questions. The reality is it's murky, and it is different. Each state is different, and insurance is different, right?
And then the money factor for sure.
Yeah. So I wish there was like a here. This is what
one size fits all.
Right.
Yeah, here you go. Here's your perfect answer.
I think the questions, just having people think about them and ahead of time, right before something emergent happens. It sounds like for your situation, you know, you guys were on top of it from the very beginning, and you just went with the flow when something came up. And so you just want to be sure that as a care partner and as family members that you have these discussions early, so that you don't get in such a bind and you're urgent and panicking and you have to just take whatever's there. You know, you want to take some time. So
yeah, and those care directives, for example, like I didn't, you know, I guess I would have been in my 20s, late 20s, when my mom appointed me to power attorney for her care, just in case. Like there wasn't any, you know, for sure this is where she's going to happen or whatever, but she wanted to make sure. And I'm glad we did that, because then she developed dementia, of course, and we needed that. But those kind of decisions aren't things that everyone wants to talk about. I was very thankful that my mom did. She had seen her father live with Alzheimer's, and I think in her mind she's like, what if, even though she didn't really want to think about that, she was just like, I want to make sure that my kids, you know, we've got this sorted out before I get, you know, too far down the road. So those are important things to do. Yeah.
So aside from some of the things that we've talked about, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced as a care partner? And I would say, you know, certainly, I guess starting at the point where your mom started to need care. So you were a teenager, a young teenager when she was diagnosed. But when did how old were you when you actually had to start kind of helping out? And then what were some of the biggest challenges you faced, and how did you manage them?
Right. So yeah, initially you're just the caregiver, you're the cheerleader, the encourager. Come on, mom, you know, and because I didn't know a lot about Parkinson's, I didn't know that, and this is a challenge, is I didn't realize that anxiety could be a symptom of Parkinson's and depression. For my mom, anxiety was just, my mom was kind of a worrywart before, so we just kind of like, Mom, stop being so, you know, it's no big deal. So that's my 20-something-year-old voice. And then as I would say, like, I'm in my late 20s, 30s, is when, late 20s for sure. And that's when I'm sort of becoming more aware of this whole picture. And as an adult now, I'm getting to know my mom as an adult. I'm not the kid anymore. We're speaking more on that level, which is what I was saying about, we're now able to have conversations about, here's all the things we learned so far, and here's what mom needs help with. And now I'm like her partner, right? In crime, not in crime. But how are we going to tackle this Parkinson's? And so the challenges that over time that I experienced were similar to many others in terms of the dynamic of daughter, mother, is, I wanted to do things for her a lot of the time, like just faster. It's like, I didn't have the patience. Mom, I'll just do it. Like, let's just, shouldn't do that. I should not have done, in hindsight, there's, that dynamic shifts, right? My mom was losing self-esteem because she's not the one, she can't do as many things as she used to be able to do. And now it's her daughter, giving her advice or whatever. I had to make sure that I didn't do that unsolicited. If she wanted help, I would give it to her, and I could, instead of saying, do this, it's offer suggestions, you learn about that. But again, I don't beat myself up for making those mistakes because I didn't know. I was just, I thought it'd be faster if I did it for her, or, do it my way, mom. I am not, and that's the other thing I learned, is that I am not my mother. She likes things done differently than I do. And so it took a lot of, patience and just breathing, because that would be my challenge. And I think everyone that I talk to that's cared for somebody with Parkinson's, and I'm laughing with everybody, because it's a thing. Patience is tough. It's hard. Parkinson's can be very frustrating, extremely frustrating for the person who has it, but also extremely frustrating for the person who's caring for them, and seeing your loved one struggle. Like, I didn't want to see her struggle. I wanted to help her. I'm like, mom, and it takes a lot of time and patience, and me learning to offer suggestions, like what the mobility thing, when we learned walking through doorways sideways was like the best way to get through things, through those doorways. I just go, oh yeah, right before I go, hey mom, want to try walking sideways? And she said, oh yeah, because she'd forget that would work. But instead of, it was just a slight change. Instead of, mom, turn around, go sideways, I was like, do you want to walk sideways? Things like that, offering. And so that's the dynamic between like a mother-daughter versus a spouse is quite, different in terms of the dynamics. But I would say for as a daughter, that the challenges were patience and just seeing my mom struggle, and wanting to do absolutely everything, just not feeling satisfied if I couldn't make everything the best for her. Like, that was the hardest thing. My heart was heavy a lot of the time, because I just wanted, we were very close, so I just really wanted that for her.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh God. Oh, that's a lot. Just trying to help them. And I think that's really powerful. The language switch from walk through the door, or, walk sideways, or, hey mom, you want to walk sideways? Like, yeah. That's really different.
Like, hey, I remember, sometimes when I go, hey, remember when we tried, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
Because honestly, she actually had forgotten, it wasn't dementia necessarily. It's just, how Parkinson's brains can't multitask. So they're just literally trying to think about this one thing right now, right? They're not recalling what worked like just this morning. So it's helpful to just, but I mean, to try these suggestion like that way of talking. I know my mom, we discovered one of her greatest loves was gardening outside, rock gardening, planting rocks and little flowers around rocks, but she couldn't do it a lot. And so she would get someone to help her. Well, I am not a gardener. So I would just like, mom, I'm just putting this flower right here. And she goes, no, it needs to go over here. So she's sitting in her wheelchair, kind of directing me. And I'd be like, I am not made for this job. Again, late 20s, early 30s. Now I don't mind gardening, but back then I was just definitely, this was not my skill. skill set, let alone dealing with my mom who needed it exactly the way. So I found my aunt. She, another aunt who loved to garden, and she was all over it. And she designed the whole thing for mom exactly the way she wanted. I was like so thankful. So just that was a little kind of lesson of, you don't have to do everything for it. You can find people that can do these things, even as something as like fun things that my mom thought was fun, I didn't think was fun.
Right, right. Well, I mean, that's a huge lesson. And I think, yeah, care partners want to do it all.
Yeah.
And they'll start to feel guilty. But I mean, just the joy you felt in passing that off and seeing how happy it made your other aunt.
And then everybody's happy, right?
Everybody's happy. Yes, absolutely. So what would you say, if you had the chance to talk to care partners, which is the most surprising thing that you learned from being
well, there's a couple of ways to answer that. One, I'd say a surprising thing about Parkinson's is just how variable it is. Certainly when mom was first diagnosed, I had no idea, you have no idea. But in terms of how she responded to happy events it was just mind-boggling at times. She could be using a walker and then just drop it when she heard music, or when she's just a happy time, like her retirement, for example. That was year 10 or 11. She'd been experiencing a lot of mobility issues at that point when she decided to retire. And I swear, when she was at the party, everyone was like, I thought she had Parkinson's. I'm like, she does. You can't tell.
That's like the guy in court that has like says that somebody hit him in the car and he's got the brace on, and then
right. Like, they don't believe you.
You're like, no. She's still bad. Yeah.
But this is a great thing. And then on her wedding day, Dave, like, I have pictures of her in the morning where we're getting her hair ready, and there's her with her cane, and which was in itself, that was pretty good that she was so mobile in the morning. Mornings were her tough times. So she was only using a cane at that time. And then by afternoon and the rest of the days are days when she would normally be, let's say 50%, like, half the time she's mobile, half the time she's not. And that day was like complete, didn't need anything. I mean, she's dancing on the dance floor. I have pictures, we have video of her dancing. I'm like, I never seen my mom dance. First of all, I've never seen her like dance like this. But the fact that she was able to do that, it was just like such a joy to see, but also just like, how can we have a party for her every weekend? Because this is really good medicine. This just her brain being happy, those endorphins, and just how that chemical change makes her body. And I'm not saying this is like the permanent proof, obviously we know that we can't cure Parkinson's, but come on. I have to tell you that those moments were just proof that or the surprising moments where I saw my mom, and later on in her disease, even in like 4 years into being in nursing homes, I have video of her she's just now gotten out of her wheelchair, which she was in almost all the time. And she's pushing it around dancing to New York by Frank Sinatra. And every time it would surprise me, like music and just happy times. In addition, that's something that just surprised me about Parkinson's. In terms of surprising, in terms of caregiving, I'm surprised. Surprise makes it sound like a good thing, but I was frustrated and surprised at how hard it was to find quality help later on. I mean, I make it sound like it was easy, but we did find it, but there was a lot of work and determination and me advocating for her. I guess I'm surprised at how few people in the healthcare system, I guess would be the thing, know very much about Parkinson's. And that is something that I'm driven to change, to help change.
Yeah, that is a big thing. I mean, it's, we hear all the time the stories about people that end up in the hospital because they fell, freezing of gait, maybe they fell, and then they wind up in an emergency room and they have they'll take them off their meds, or they're just not listening to it. And I mean, we have some educating to do, I think.
For sure. Yeah. And it is, I guess, I don't know why, because we live in the Parkinson's world. So But it is, I just assume everybody knows now. And like Michael J. Fox has it, doesn't everybody know what Parkinson's is and what we need, and you need your medications on time and blah, 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 blah. No, they don't. They don't all know that. And
Yeah.
I know, I went to nursing school. I did 1 year, and I remember thinking, my mom didn't have Parkinson's back then when actually, no, that's not true. She did. It was very early on. I was 19. And I remember, they do a little thing on cancer. They do a little thing on whatever, nowadays it'd be quite a bit different, but you can't learn everything about everything anyways. As a low level nurse that I was, that's not something you learn by doing. And when you go and you work in a nursing home, which is where all my placements were as a nursing student, you see a lot of things, but mostly you're just dealing with the stuff that nobody else wants to do, like the hands-on caregiving stuff that, yeah. So all that to say, I understand, I'm empathetic that nurses and healthcare workers can't know everything there is to know about Parkinson's, but I would like them to know the minimal, and that is about, when you talked about medications, how important they are on time and being delivered in general.
Absolutely. So what are you looking forward to now? You said your mom passed a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
And you're still working on, you're working on an update to your book and another book, right? So can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, the Everything You Need to Know About Caregiving for Parkinson's just released again. So that's the newest edition. So I originally wrote that in 2016 and was grateful that a publisher wanted to help me get that out again in a better and more expanded form. And so that one is now out as of last month. And the complete guide for people with Parkinson's is also a sort of the companion book for the caregiving book. And that's for people that are just diving into Parkinson's now and learning about, if you want to know basically a little bit about everything related to Parkinson's and you're new to the disease, especially those who are new to the disease, that's sort of the two books that I've released for that. The third one I'm working on right now relates to kind of later stages, Parkinson's path. That's the one I'm working on right now. And it's to deal with those things like the emotional toll that it takes on people with Parkinson's, depression, anxiety, and how we deal with those things, and just how basic things that we learned within the journey that my mom had of 30 years of how to be more positive, how to plan for Parkinson's when it's such an unpredictable disease. How did we do that? Things like that. So that's, looking forward to that in early 2021. And then I'm just doing talks like this and trying to help people. I've been doing some care coaching, which is new, just helping caregivers just basically talk like this, like I'm talking with you, and people often just want to chat and pick my brain about things that I did with my mom, what worked and what didn't.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, we're doing a bunch of care partner things next year, so we'd love to have you participate.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Great. That'd be great. We're doing a monthly meetup, so we'll definitely have you on one of those.
Excellent.
As well. I know everyone would love it. Okay, so you have the floor. What do you want care partners to know? What those people that are just learning this, they are just finding out that their person with Parkinson's has Parkinson's. Yeah. What words of wisdom do you have for them?
That's a great question. No pressure. I think there's so many cliches, like you're not alone, but you feel alone a lot of the time. And so just because somebody told me I wasn't alone, I was like, but I am. And I got to tell you though, that there is light at the tunnel if you want to look for the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that a lot of people get so consumed in the ball just gets bigger and bigger and bigger going down the hill, and before you know it, you've been rolled over by this big boulder. And I want to implore people to not let that happen, that it's not stupid or silly or unwise to start taking care of yourself right away, and to look at this as a long journey, and not there is something to be said about take every day as it comes, for sure, You can't plan everything, but there are also a lot of things you can do. And it's so imperative that you take care of yourself. I saw it so many, I've seen it so many times. I saw it personally with Dave. He ended up not caring about himself. His health deteriorated and he passed away from skin cancer and colon cancer. He had diabetes. He had so many things that had piled up that he did nothing about because he was so like, oh, I'll deal with that later. Things that could have been prevented. And those are extreme health challenges, but so many people are caring for loved ones in their later years. Both are in their later years, in their 70s. 60s, 70s, 80s, and they're not caring about their own health. And I just cannot say it enough times to care for yourself first. It's not selfish. It's imperative if you want to be an effective caregiver. There's no other way to be a caregiver if you can't and don't take care of yourself.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for being here again.
You're welcome.
We'll have you back. I know everyone's going to love this conversation.
Thank you,
so thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon.
Okay.